Is everyone enjoying this good weather today? I would say it's perfect weather. Sunny, but it's not too hot. And it's I don't know why, but last night it got nice and cool, which is nice. Whenever that happens, I open all my windows. But yeah, it's a nice day. So anyhow, I hope you're doing well today. And I was interested to see this article on the front page today because I was kind of surprised because I didn't even realize there was still a mask requirement, face mask requirement anywhere. But then I did remember that if you go to a hospital, you're supposed to have a face mask on. And I remember about 6 months ago, I was at the hospital and I remember I had to remember to bring a face mask because I don't wear one much anymore. So anyhow, it says CDC lifts mask rule for medical institutions. And so I thought, we'd look at this quickly and then we'll go to some other stories. So first of all, what is a institution? What does that mean? This last word here, right here. Yeah, it's a big word. I mean, it's a word we can use for many things. It's like an organization kind of. But the word institution often gets used for certain organizations like hospitals or schools and things like that. I mean, occasionally it's used as an association, but often we say medical institution or educational institution. So it's like it's not a company. So when I'm looking for a word that doesn't describe a company. It's more like a educational or medical, or I'm trying to think what else there might be. Yeah, you could say that. I guess it's not. It could be. I mean, a bank is a kind of company, but yeah, it's kind of an organization related to a certain group. So we could say a financial institution. We could say what else? We could say a government institution, right? I mean, that would be another way of saying it. So. We could, if someone says, well, what is the CDC, for example? What is that? And we could say, oh, that's a government institution. Okay. So, or a government organization, or I guess sometimes we say a government establishment. Okay. But, oh yeah, library would be a educational institution, because people come here to look at books and learn things. So yeah, it's a good word, and it's often a word. Like I said, often when I'm using this word, I'm talking about something that's not just a company, right, or just a normal 协会. It's a little bit more like something like this, like a hospital or library or school or university. Those are all words. We could use this word for all of those. So why don't we say together, institution. Institution. Now, sometimes, occasionally, you'll see this word used as institute, right? For example, we can say the institute of something, something. We could say it's almost, again, the word can be used like an organization, okay? Like a medical institute or a educational institute. So in that case, it's INSTITUTE, okay? Institute. So why don't we say that word too? Institute. Institute. Okay, so here it says CDC lifts mask rule for medical institutions. Okay, of course, when we say medical institutions, we're not only talking about hospitals, but what else would that include? What else? What are the medical institutions are there? Nursing home. Okay, what else? A what? Pharmacy, yeah, I think we could say that. I always think of a clinic, right? Like 诊所, right? CLINIC, right? Clinic. Most people, when they want to see a doctor, they'll go to a clinic maybe before a hospital. So clinic, pharmacy, a dental clinic. If you go to see your your dentist, okay? All those things are kinds of medical institutions. They're places where you get medical care, medical services. Okay, so let's go ahead and read this. It says, masks are no longer required in medical institutions from Sunday next week. The Centers for Disease Control announced yesterday, officially ending all COVID-19 mask restrictions. Okay, so they're no longer required. What would be another word, just to practice your words? if we say it's no longer required, what would be another word instead of saying require? We could say it's no longer what? Necessary. But necessary is more like a need, okay? But when we say you must do something, like there's a law or a rule, we say it is what? Well, you're very close. When you think of demanded, think about, there's something that sounds similar to that word. Requested, okay, but I think someone, maybe as you said, mandatory. Sorry. Anyhow. Yeah, mandatory. Remember we talked about mandatory military service, right? In Taiwan now, young men have to do 1 year of mandatory military service. So why don't we say together, mandatory? Mandatory. So we could say masks are no longer mandatory in medical institutions. Okay, so that would be another way of saying that. Okay, so anyhow, they're no longer mandatory, no longer required in medical institutions from Sunday next week. Officially ending, okay, so this is it. This is the end of all COVID-19 mass restrictions, which is, it's been a long time. Okay, now of course restriction means what? What's this last word mean? A restriction means what? What would be another word for that? A limitation or limit, or some sort of, yeah, when you limit something, you restrict it, right? For example, if you say this room is restricted to adults, okay, maybe we said only adults can come in this room, no children allowed, or this room is restricted to humans, maybe no pets are allowed, people can't bring animals, okay? So when we say it's restricted to, or there's a restriction on something, right? For example, we could say there's a restriction on pets, restriction on animals. It means that they are restricted, they are limited. Okay, so why don't we say it together? To restrict. To restrict. Restrictions. Restrictions. Okay, so let's read this. Masks are no longer to be required in medical institutions from Sunday next week. The Centers for Disease Control announced yesterday, officially ending all COVID-19 mask restrictions. Restrictions. Right, okay. So it says here, masks would be recommended rather than mandatory. Okay, there's that word. In all medical institutions and centers for the elderly, CDC Deputy Director General Zheng Shuhui said following an expert meeting to assess the COVID-19 situation. Okay, what does assess mean? They assessed the COVID. What would be another word for that? Evaluate, right? To what else? To what? Estimate is more like UG, but we could say to evaluate, to investigate. Well, actually, investigate's a little bit more like 调查. So the best word would be evaluate or analyze, right? If you analyze something, you're going to assess, you're going to measure. Okay, so if you measure something, you analyze something, you evaluate something. Actually, a real simple word that could kind of be similar, we could simply say to study something, right? You're looking at it more closely, you're looking into it, okay? So you want to assess you want to evaluate, you want to analyze, you want to study, you want to measure the COVID situation. Okay, so anyhow, why don't we say the word together? Assess. Assess. Measure. Measure. Analyze. Analyze. Evaluate. Evaluate. Study. Okay, so masks would be recommended rather than mandatory in all medical institutions and centers for the elderly. Actually, earlier someone said nursing homes. Nursing home may not be actually a medical institution, but it is similar. It's related. I mean, obviously, nursing home, you're not there because you're sick. but you could receive some medical care there. I don't know. So anyhow, they distinguish here between these two, medical institutions and centers for the elderly. Okay, so they're recommended, not mandatory. Okay, so let's read this. Masks would be recommended rather than mandatory in all medical institutions and centers for the elderly. CDC Deputy Director General Zheng Shuhui said following an expert meeting to assess the COVID-19 situation. Right, okay. So, there are situations where sometimes you ask somebody, maybe they ask you to do something. You say, do I have to do that? And they might say, no, but it's recommended that you do that, right? This happens a lot. Someone might say, do I really have to make a reservation for this restaurant? And someone say, no, you don't have to make a reservation, but we recommend that you make a reservation, maybe because there's too many people coming, and if you want to make sure you have a seat or place to sit. So we recommend you do it, but it's not mandatory. It's not something you have to do. Of course, if someone says, do I have to wear my seatbelt? You would say, yes, that is mandatory. You are required to wear your seatbelt in the car. Okay, so it says here, the decision was made after considering similar policies set by the WHO, as well as the US, UK, and other nations, Zheng said. Okay, so they were considering, okay, so that would be kind of similar to here. We could say to consider, to measure, to analyze similar policies, to evaluate similar policies, to think about, okay, they're all kind of similar. Okay, set by the World Health Organization. Okay, so let's read this real quick. The decision was made after considering similar policies set by the WHO, as well as the US, UK, and other nations. Zheng said. Right, okay. Yeah. Yeah, sanatorium is not a word we use too much anymore. I think, I'm trying to remember what a sanatorium, I think it gets used in different ways. I think it can be used for people with specific sicknesses. Like if someone has, do you know what the sickness, TB, tuberculosis? I think when people used to get sick with that, they would send them to a sanatorium. It was a special place for care for people with that. How do you say TB in Chinese? Yeah, it used to be a common disease, not so much today, but it's still around. So yeah, sanatorium, there could be other sickness, but yeah, usually for a very specific sickness. It's not a word we use much anymore. I don't see that word used. It seems like an old word. Yeah. Okay, that's a photo caption. So it says here, under the guidelines, those exhibiting respiratory symptoms should not enter medical institutions unless necessary. But if they do, they should wear a mask until at least 5 days after symptoms ease. Okay, you know what symptoms are, right? We've talked about this word many times in the past. What is a symptom? What is it? 症状, right? 症状, right? The sign, yeah. If you're sick, when you have COVID-19, or if you have, I don't know what there's. Recently I've been reading there's been all these articles popping up online. I see, it's a good subject, but they're saying, what are the symptoms of a stroke, right? 中风, right? What are the symptoms of a heart attack? How do you know you're having a heart attack? So that, that's obviously a very important thing to know is like if someone's or you're having a heart attack or stroke, what should you look for? So we say, what are the symptoms of something like that? Now, of course, we could say symptoms of, it doesn't even have to be medical, right? Someone could say, what are the symptoms of someone who is very unhappy, right? Well, or depressed, or something like that. Okay, so why don't we say together, symptoms. Symptoms. Okay, so guidelines, in the first, third word there, what is what a guideline is, right? A guideline is like, obviously, I think the original idea of a guideline is if let's say you're walking on a path and there's some lines there that show you where you should go, like a line. Like, it's funny, in Taiwan, when you go to a hospital, right, there's all these guidelines on the floor. There's a green line and a red line and a purple line, and they tell you which way to go. So that would be a perfect example of a guideline. It tells you, it guides you. But here, a guideline is, what would be another word for a guideline? Instruction. It could be a rule. It could be suggestions. It could be regulations. There's different ways. Sometimes guidelines are suggested, they're recommended, and sometimes guidelines are mandatory, right? You have to follow them, right? So guideline is a very broad word, and it's a good word to know. So why don't we say together, guidelines? Guidelines. Okay. So, whenever you go to a new company or a new school or something, someone might say, well, what are the guidelines for this or that? What should I do? Okay, so it says here, those exhibiting. Now, this is interesting. Exhibit, what exhibit means, right? If you go over here to the, or over there to the 文化局, the culture center, you will see many exhibits, right? Or exhibitions. We could say an exhibit. When we say an exhibition, of course, it's usually like a 展览, right? It's bigger. But an exhibit could be an exhibition, or it could be a very small single thing, right? For example, you could say, I want to exhibit this painting, right? But if it was an exhibition, it might be a whole bunch of paintings. Okay, so it's a flexible word. But here, this is not talking about a 展览. What does to exhibit something mean? It means to show, right? To show. So you could say he is exhibiting the signs of, TB, or something like that. What it means to show. Or I guess you could also say to demonstrate or to show. Okay? So why don't we say together, to exhibit. To exhibit. Remember, it has a Z sound. Okay, exhibiting. Exhibiting. Now, this next word, I know we've never looked at this, but what does respiratory mean? Right. So this comes from the word respiration, T-I-O-N. Okay, respiration means basically to breathe. Okay? So everyone here has a respiratory system, right? And what does that include? Well, it includes your mouth, your nose, your lungs, basically when you breathe, everything that's part of your breathing system. So when we talk about a respiratory illness, that could include many things. Of course, I guess COVID-19 is a respiratory illness, but just a cold, if you have a 感冒, right? That's a respiratory illness. Anything that affects your respiratory system. Okay, so why don't we say it together? Respiratory. Respiratory. And then the other word, the 名词, respiration. Respiration. Okay, so those exhibiting respiratory symptoms should not enter medical institutions. Okay, that means a hospital or clinic or whatever, unless necessary. But if they do, they should wear a mask until at least 5 days after symptoms ease. Okay, so it's funny because I think Taiwan has come a really long way since, a couple years ago. Some of my friends said that her friends' children caught COVID-19. And they said, oh, do they need to stay home? And the teacher's like, oh, that's okay, just wear a mask, And I was like, oh, really? So it's like COVID-19 has become kind of normal. So yeah, it's not real strict. I mean, I think if a child got COVID-19, they might recommend they stay home for a couple days, but it's no big deal, right? It's not like a huge deal. So anyhow, let's read this together then. Under the guidelines, those exhibiting respiratory symptoms should not enter medical institutions unless necessary. But if they do, they should wear a mask until at least 5 days after symptoms ease. Symptoms ease. Actually, I forgot to mention that last word, ease. When you say his symptoms are easing, what does that mean? Yeah, to become less, to go, not, maybe not go away completely, right? But they're not as serious, okay? So if you say, oh, his symptoms are easing, maybe someone has a fever, 发烧, and their fever goes away or goes down, and you say, oh, his symptoms are easing, okay? So, yeah, we could say that, I guess, or sometimes we say the rain is easing up, which means it's lifting, it's going away, it's, disappearing. Yeah, okay. I have to tell you, I was talking to some friends last week, and this woman said her husband was feeling really sick, so he finally went to the hospital, and to their surprise, the doctor said, oh, he has hand, foot, and mouth disease. And I was like, what? Isn't that a children's disease? And she's like, yeah, I've never heard of a adult catching that disease. And and this husband, he's a big, strong guy. So I was like, what? This is really weird. But anyhow, fortunately, he's better now. But I didn't know adults could get hand, foot, mouth disease. You know what I'm talking about? Yeah, it hits children, right? Children always catch it. Every year, lots of kids get this disease. But anyhow, we were very surprised by that. I didn't know that could happen. So yeah. There's a disease that all kids catch every year. It's called enterovirus, E-N-T-E-R-O virus. I don't know what that is in Chinese. Yeah, it's very common. It goes right through the schools. Lots of children catch it. It's quite common, I think. Okay, so anyhow, it says here, those who have had close contact with someone exhibiting respiratory symptoms and those at high risk of developing complications are also advised to wear a mask in medical institutions, the guidelines say. Okay, so we say the guidelines say. We could say according to the guidelines or the guidelines say. Now, of course, the guidelines are not talking, but this is the way we put it. We say the guidelines say. Okay, that means according to the guidelines. Okay, so exhibiting, there's that word again, respiratory symptoms, and those at high risk of developing complications. What would be a complication from, I don't know, it means that something gets worse, right? So if you catch a cold, right, and you have complications, maybe I've had actually quite a number of friends, they catch a cold and then they get pneumonia or laryngitis, which is an infection of your throat. Anyhow, there's different complications, right? It doesn't mean 复杂, complex or this is complicated means 很复杂, right? But a complication means a more serious situation. It becomes more, I guess you could say it becomes more complicated because it's more serious. But yeah, it's a complication. It's something, it's like you have one thing and then it gets worse, or this leads to something else, right? Yeah, I mean, there you could get complications from anything. Okay, I'll give you an example. Sometimes even you cut your hand, right? And it's okay and it heals. But other times maybe you cut your hand and then it gets infected, right? It gets red and swollen and there's a problem and then you have to go take medicine. We say that's a complication. Okay, so let's read this together. Those who have had close contact with someone exhibiting respiratory symptoms. Okay, say it again. Respiratory symptoms. And those at high risk of developing complications are also advised to wear a mask in medical institutions. The guidelines say. Okay. Okay. Says here, those younger than 2 or have had or who have had, okay, sorry, let's read this again. Those younger than 2 or who have trouble wearing a mask should cover their mouth with tissue paper when coughing or sneezing and dispose of it after use. Okay, what does dispose mean? To throw away, right? We have lots of things today in the world that are disposable, right? Okay, what do we have that's disposable? Pretty much everything, right? Disposable. I think is that an A or? I think that's right. Yeah, disposable. What is it? What do we have that's disposable today? We have disposable paper cups. We have disposable bags. We have disposable. Yeah, pretty much everything, right? I mean, you can throw it away after you use it, which is why, of course, there's so much garbage, right, and waste. Unfortunately, this is something that so now the government is trying to move away from disposable items to what's the opposite of disposable? Actually, it's a good word. Close, not recycle. What do we say? Reusable. Yeah. So, when nowadays, when you go to a restaurant, sometimes they'll give you a discount if you bring your own reusable item. You bring a reusable cup or reusable spoon or fork or knife or whatever. Yeah. So we say reusable. So disposable and reusable. It's funny how we get used to disposable stuff. I remember, when the government was talking about, going to a tea shop and bringing your own cup. And I was like, who brings their own cup? Nobody carries a cup around. But then people started doing it, right? Or, well, there's other issues too. I remember when the fast food restaurants stopped using straws, right? Or at least plastic straws. I know if you go to some places now, they have a paper straw, which is, it's biodegradable, it's disposable, but it'll recycle. Yeah. So anyhow, there's these issues. So it says here those younger than 2 years old, or who have trouble wearing a mask. Okay, so maybe some, I don't know. I know kids sometimes don't like to wear a mask. Should cover their mouth with tissue paper. What is tissue paper? It's okay. Tissue, is I don't know, when I go to the supermarket to buy, there's actually, there's toilet paper, which is what? 卫生纸. But then tissue paper is a little bit different. It's similar but different. It's, how do you say tissue paper? Is there a different word in Chinese? Yeah. So, you blow your nose, or, if something, people carry tissue paper. But, I know that the government says you're not supposed to use tissue paper as toilet paper, right? Because toilet paper is designed to dissolve in water, okay? And you know what dissolve means. I think we've talked about this word, right? What is dissolve? Yeah. Right, you throw it in the water and it disappears eventually, okay? So if you put, I don't know, there's a lot of things dissolve in water. You put it in water and it dissolves. So toilet paper is designed to kind of dissolve in water, but tissue paper does not. So anyhow, so why don't we say together, tissue paper? Tissue paper. Now, I will say that sometimes we don't say tissue paper, we simply say a tissue. So someone might say, oh, do you have a tissue? It means a piece of tissue paper. Okay, so. I do, but I know some people hate that. They think it's very unsanitary. It's funny because, I use tissue too, but it's very common for, at least in the West, for people to carry a handkerchief, right? But some people think, oh, well, that's kind of, it's kind of gross, or I don't know. People have different ideas about that. Some people think tissue papers, it's mafan, and other people think, well, handkerchief, you can reuse it, right? You can wash it and use it again. So I don't know. Yeah. So I tend to carry a handkerchief. So. Well, you fold it, right? I mean, it's not like all messy, right? And then you put it in the washing machine and you wash it and you use it again. So yeah. Anyhow, people have their different preferences, right? Okay, so why don't we read this together then? Those younger than 2 or who have trouble wearing a mask should cover their mouth with tissue paper when coughing or sneezing, and dispose of it after use. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So let's just go a little bit further here. It says, meanwhile, a statement about expiration dates on the 10 million free COVID-19 tests that the CDC plans to distribute to more than 4,500 national health insurance contracted pharmacies nationwide has sparked concern among members of the public. Okay, so a statement about, I mean, this is something I guess the government said. What's an expiration date? I mean, you know this, right? Yeah, it's the date that something expires, right? You know, when you buy food today, any kind of packaged food, it has an expiration date, which, you know, it's when a date that the food expires. It's funny because in America, often it doesn't say expiration, it says best used by certain date. I'll be completely honest with you. I often eat food after the expiration date because to me, I always think that food, when they calculate the expiration date, I think they're very, very 很保守, right? So often I look at it and I'm like, this still looks okay, you know. And I'll eat it, you know. Whereas most of my staff in my office, you know, in my COMPASS magazine office, they're all Taiwanese and they're all super, super careful. So if they see something that's one day over the expiration, they're all like, get rid of it. And I'm like, oh, it's okay, no problem. Just give it to me, I'll eat it. I will say one thing, in all the years I've done that, I've never gotten sick from anything I've eaten. So I don't know, maybe I'm pushing my luck. So yeah. Why don't we say it? Expiration dates. Expiration dates. Okay. So so expiration dates on the 10 million free COVID-19 tests. So these COVID-19 tests, they have an expiration date. Okay. So they're going to distribute them to over 4,500 NHI. Of course, National Health Insurance is 健保, right? Contracted pharmacies. What is a pharmacy? What's another word for that? Drugstore, yeah. So we say pharmacy, drugstore. Why don't we read that together? Pharmacies. Pharmacies. Yeah. I think I've told you before, the one big difference between the United States and Taiwan is that in the US, I think by law, the pharmacy can never be at the hospital. A hospital does not have a pharmacy. A clinic does not have a pharmacy. You have to go to a separate pharmacy to get your drugs, which I think Taiwan's more convenient. You know, Taiwan, everything is 很方便, right? So if you go see a doctor in America, they will ask you, what pharmacy do you want to pick up your medicine? And of course, when we say to pick up your medicine, we often say the doctor, we call that a prescription. Oops. Because the doctor will prescribe medicine. Okay, that's a prescribe. To prescribe, right? That means to tell you, give you, or say what kind of medicine you should take. So you can say the doctor prescribed aspirin, you know, aspirin for my sickness. And so when the doctor writes out a piece of paper and says, here's the medicine I want you to get or buy or take, that's called a prescription, okay? So you take your prescription to the pharmacy, and then the pharmacy will give you your medicine, okay? Now, the only difference between Taiwan and the U.S. is in Taiwan, you can do it usually at right nearby or at the hospital, but in America, you have to go to an outside pharmacy. Okay, so why don't we say together, to prescribe. To prescribe. Prescription. Prescription. Okay. So yeah, these are contracted pharmacies nationwide. Okay, has sparked concern. Spark, of course, means to cause, to trigger, to set off concern among the members of the public. Now, if we want to shorten that, we don't have to say members of the public. We can say among the public or with the public. Okay, members of the public, with the public. Okay, so let's read this together. Meanwhile, a statement about expiration dates. Expiration dates on the 10 million free COVID-19 tests that the CDC plans to distribute to more than 4,500 let's say it again, 4,500 National Health Insurance contracted pharmacies nationwide has sparked concern among members of the public. Okay. Of course, when we say National Health Insurance contract, that means that contract is like a 合约, right? So if the pharmacy has a 合约 with the, 健保, the NHI, the 健保局, right? So of course, this would be something. Okay. So let's see here. Okay, I don't think we have to read any more about this article, but yeah, anyhow, I just thought this is very interesting because, we've lived through years of COVID-19 related issues and restrictions and limitations and requirements, and finally we're out. It's over. I hope. Yeah. Okay. Oops. So anyhow, let's go on to a different story. Okay. I saw another story that was kind of interesting. Let's So this is a very different subject. Let's see. Okay, as you know, I saw some articles analysis recently that it was funny because, well, it's not funny, but it's interesting because it said some people think there's a greater chance of war between the U.S. and China, not because of Taiwan, but because of the South China Sea, the Philippines, right? So, I thought that was very interesting. Obviously, it's something that we need to keep watching. But here recently the Philippines and the U.S. had these military exercises. And exercise means 运动, right? You go out and exercise. But what does this kind of exercise mean? Yeah, it's like yan shi, right? It's like military exercise. So this is a different kind of exercise. Okay, so here it says U.S. Philippine troops sink China-made vessel in drills. Now, when we say the word vessel, we've said this before. What does that mean? It's a ship, yeah. Now, the word vessel can be used for ships. That's where it's usually used, or boats. Anything that floats on the water that you sit in, like a boat, a canoe, a ship. They're all different kinds of vessels. Sailboat. But a vessel, because we've said before, this word often gets words that use for boats and ships often get used also for aircraft, right? So sometimes you will see an airplane referred to as a vessel, although it's not very common. But yeah, sometimes. But anyhow, usually 95% of the time it's used for a ship. I guess we could also say a spacecraft, if you're up in space. Sometimes people use that word vessel. Okay, so why don't we say together vessel? Vessel. Okay. Now, vessel could also be something that contains like a drinking vessel, like a cup. Actually, that's a kind of vessel, or a jar or bowl. Those are all kinds of vessels that hold something like water or some often liquid. That's the word we say, a vessel. What? Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's another one. Actually, I forgot about that one. A blood vessel. So your veins. What is that? 血管, right? That would be we could say a blood vessel. So yeah, that's good. I didn't even remember that. It's another kind of vessel. So the word vessel gets used in different ways, but this vessel is a ship. Okay. So it says here, U.S. and Philippine forces yesterday sank a decommissioned China-made Philippine Navy ship during South China Sea war games, simulating an attack on an enemy vessel, officials said. Okay, so there's a few words here. The first word, okay, so these are the U.S. and the Philippines, sank a decommissioned. Okay, so let's first of all think about, what does the word commissioned mean? Yeah, to put into service, right? So sometimes when an airline buys a new airplane or a company buys a new ship, they will commission the ship. It means that they will launch the ship. So in a way, commission, I guess, could be, it's kind of similar. It's a little bit similar to the word launch, right? Because you launch a ship, you launch an airplane, you say, okay, this is the beginning of like you said, to put into service, okay? So you commission something. Now, if it's decommissioned, then what does that mean? Right, it's retired. It's taken out of service, okay? So we do this, again, this word gets used a lot for ships and airplanes, okay? So I love airplanes. I've told you this many times, but what was it? A few years ago, maybe about 2 years ago, I remember Huahang, China Airlines decommissioned its last Boeing 747, right? Boeing 747 airplanes. They retired these airplanes, right? They're, I love 747s. And then just it was about 2 months ago, 1 or 2 months ago, the last 747 flying passengers, not cargo, not Hoyun, but passengers. It's been flying between Korea and Taipei, and it's for Asiana Airlines, not Korean Airlines, but it's Asiana is a Korean airline. I don't know how you say it in Chinese. I don't know the Chinese name, but they had the last 747, Boeing 747, but yeah, the airline was called Asiana, and they were only using this airplane, this 747, on the Taipei Seoul flight, back and forth. And so many people who love 747s, they would come and fly to Taipei or Korea just to fly on this airplane. And then about a month ago, or 1 or 2 months ago, they had the final flight to Taipei of this airplane before they decommissioned it, before they retired it. And so all these people were taking pictures or trying to get on that airplane. And actually, I thought, I should get a ticket on that airplane. But I heard all the tickets sold out really fast because everyone wanted to fly on that last flight. So yeah. So we say decommission. Of course, this ship is no longer in service. Okay, it's no longer being used. Now, there is one other word. This word commission can also mean to commission. We can say other things. Commission a project, for example. Commission. I'll tell you a really interesting one is, you don't see this too much, maybe not so much anymore. Yeah, you still do. But a work of art. Let's say, for example, I'm the government or I'm a rich person and I want somebody to do a painting for me. I will commission an artist to do a painting, or maybe a sculpture, or some work of art. I will commission that. Means I will ask an artist to do that. I will pay them money to do that. So we can say he commissioned a new painting for his house. He commissioned that sculpture out there to put in front of the library. Okay, so if you pay somebody or you to launch or do something, we can say that we can use the word to commission something. Okay, and the money that you get for doing that can also be called a commission. You can say, I received a $1 million commission to put up that building, or to build that house. So commission is a word we get used a lot to when you pay someone to do something or you receive money to do something. That's a commission. But this commission is different. It means to go into service, or here it means to be taken out of service. Okay? So anyhow, that word is very broad. Why don't we say it again? Yeah. So that's yet another word is a commissioned officer would be an officer at a higher rank, whereas a non-commissioned officer would be like a sergeant. I don't know how to say it in Chinese. It has the 3 stripes. Yeah. So we have commission and non-commissioned officers. That's another completely different meaning for the word. Okay, so why don't we say it together? Commission. Commission. Decommission. Decommission. And again, as you can see, this word can be a 名词 or a 动词. It can be used either way. Okay, so they sank. Okay, you know what to sink means, right? To make it go underwater, to sink it. They sank a decommissioned China-made Philippine Navy ship during South China Sea war games. Now, this is interesting. We could say war, instead of war games, we could say exercise, right? We talked about Yanxi. A war game, of course, it's not a real war. It's a war game. It's like a practice. So we say war games simulating an attack on an enemy vessel. What does to simulate mean? Yeah, it means to pretend that something is happening, right? So, okay, I was just thinking for some reason, I was just thinking of, earthquakes, right? 地震. Have you seen there's some places where they have a special house and they simulate an earthquake, right? To test something. It's kind of cool, actually. You go in there and the whole place shakes and they kind of see if something will, how strong a structure is. We call that a simulation. On your computer, you can do a flight simulator, right? Where you can pretend you're flying an airplane, right? You take off, you fly around, and then you land the airplane. We call that a flight simulator, okay? It's a simulation. It is simulating the flying an airplane, okay? So this word, as a means, we can say simulation, T-I-O-N, a simulation of something, okay? This is not real. It's only a simulation, okay? We could say that, okay? So why don't we say it together? To simulate. To simulate. And then simulation. Simulation. Okay, so these are war games that are simulating, they're pretending that there's an attack on an enemy vessel. And that's why they sank the ship. Okay. Okay, so let's read this together. U.S. and Philippine forces yesterday sank a decommissioned China-made Philippine Navy ship during South China Sea war games, simulating an attack on an enemy vessel, officials said. Okay. Now, of course, I forgot to mention, but I think you all know, when we say U.S. and Philippine forces, of course, we're talking about military forces, right? We're talking about a military group or military force. We could have a large force or a small force. Okay. So here's that word, exercise. The exercises are being held near the city of Laoag, I guess that's the way you say it, maybe Laoag, about 400 kilometers south of Taiwan, amid a backdrop of increased confrontations between Philippine and Chinese vessels around South China Sea, features claimed by Manila and Beijing. Okay, so here we have the exercises. This is Yanxi, are being held near the city of Laoag, about 400 kilometers, 400 公里 south of Taiwan, amid, okay, amid, of course, means in the middle of, a backdrop of increased confrontation. So what is a backdrop? Yeah, it's more like Beijing, right? Your backdrop. So literally, what is a backdrop? A backdrop is, when you have a play, like a 表演, right? Like you go to a play, and there's like a big painting behind the stage, we call that a backdrop, okay? Or let's say, when you go to get a picture taken of yourself, maybe you want a photograph of yourself, and you go to the photographer, and he has all these different backdrops that you can use. He says, okay, do you want a forest behind you? Do you want a building behind you? Do you want a library behind you? And he can pull down different backdrops to put behind you. It's like a background. So that's what we call as a backdrop. We use this for, we could say a setting, like a setting, like a stage setting, setting. But but here we're not talking about a real backdrop, like a literal backdrop, but we say a backdrop of what? Increased confrontations between the Philippine and Chinese vessels. So it says that these exercises, this is almost like, here's our 演习, right? And what's the backdrop? What's going on behind it, right? What's in the background? And that is this increased confrontation between the Philippines and China in Nanhai, right, in the South China Sea. So all that's going on at the same time, or in the background. Does everybody understand what I mean? What my meaning is there? Okay. Now, of course, confrontation, we've talked about this many times, is like a face-off, to confront, to face somebody, okay? If you've watched the TV news recently, you see this all the time, right? The Philippines boats are trying to sail, and the Chinese Coast Guard is using a water cannon, shooting water at them to stop them, and it's a lot of confrontation. Okay, so why don't we say this word together? Backdrop. Backdrop. Confrontations. Confrontations. Okay, so it says here, between Philippine and Chinese vessels or ships around South China Sea, features claimed by Manila and Beijing. Now, this is interesting. When we say features, what they're really saying is they're saying, let me just add another 形容词. We usually say geographic features. And you know what geographic means, right? It means 地理, right? Okay, so it's interesting because the reason why they say geographic features is because some of these geographic features in Nanhai, South China Sea, they're not actually technically islands. They're not actually officially a dao, right? Like an island. They're like maybe we say a sandbar or a shoal or something, but it's not like a real island, Maybe it's some coral, sitting up above the water. And so these are not, and of course China has built a lot of artificial islands. They're not recognized as real islands. They're man-made. Okay, so anyhow, that's why I think they use the word feature. They can't say island. There's an island is a geographical feature. A mountain is a geographical feature. But here, of course, they mean that this is not necessarily an island. It could be many other things too. So South China Sea features, actually, why don't we say together, geographic features. Geographic features. Okay, claimed by Manila and Beijing. Of course, this is the big problem, of course, is that, I think the problem is more on China's side, is they claim the entire South China Sea, right? Which is a problem. I often tell my friends it would be a little bit like if Mei Guo said that, the Caribbean Sea, right? The Caribbean down near Florida and Mexico. If the U.S. said, okay, the Caribbean Ocean all belongs to us, it's all ours, these other countries don't have any rights to it. People would think, I think that's kind of crazy, right? But that's what's happening with the South China Sea. Okay, so let's read this together. The exercises are being held near the city of Laoag, about 400 kilometers. Either way is fine. Kilometers, kilometers, either is fine. Okay, south of Taiwan. Amid a backdrop of increased confrontations between Philippine and Chinese vessels around South China Sea, features claimed by Manila and Beijing. Okay. It says here the BRP Lake Caliraya, a small tanker decommissioned by the Philippine Navy in 2020, slowly dipped below the water after being struck by waves of anti-ship missiles, rockets, cannon fire, and land-based artillery off Laoag, the officials said. Okay, now BRP is it's a little, they put it for the Navy, they add it in front of their ship names, right? Just like in America, the U.S. Navy says USS, right? USS, United States ship, and then there's a name. Or in the British Navy, I think it's RN or RNS, right? Oh, no, it's HMS, that's it. HMS, actually it's very interesting. British ships all start with HMS. And yeah, her, or actually you can't say Her Majesty's. Now what does it mean? His Majesty's ship. Okay, so that's what HMS stands for. HMS, Her Majesty, or His Majesty's ship, and then you have the name, right? So USS means United States ship, and then it has the name. So BRP, actually, I don't know what that means. But I mean, I assume P stands for Philippines, but it must mean it must be in their own language or something. So anyhow, it's BRP, and then the name of the ship is Lake Caliraya. Okay, and the small tanker. What's a tanker? What kind of ship is that? What is it? What do we do with tankers? What do we? Not containers. What do you put in a tanker? Oil. Yes. Yeah. So a tanker is used to carry oil. Okay. Now, of course, this is a small tanker, but if you look at really huge tankers, what do we call those? We call those super tankers. Yeah, we add the word super, chaoji, in front of it, so it actually becomes one word, I think, super tanker. So yeah, if you look at, most of the ships that carry the oil around the world, they're huge, they're enormous. We call those super tankers. Okay, so this is a small tanker decommissioned by the Philippine Navy in 2020. So the ship is no longer being used. It's out of service. Slowly dipped below the water. Okay, now to dip means what? To sink, to go below. Now, if you're going to go swimming and you say, I'm going to go take a dip in the ocean, that means get into the water, right? Often, sometimes dip means like a small jump in the water. When I say I'm going to take a dip, sometimes that means that I'm just going to jump in real quickly and come out real quickly. I'm not going to spend a long time in the water. But the word can be used in many different ways. You can say he's going to take a dip in the bathtub, right? If you're going to take a bath, right? So to dip means to put into the water, right? To dip. You can say, I dipped my hand into the water, okay? So we use that word. But here the ship slowly dipped below the water, so it was sinking. It was going under the water, okay? After being struck, after being hit by waves, okay? Waves means not just one, but there were many, like a whole bunch, many. Anti-ship missiles, okay, so this is a feidan that's used to, hit, to attack ships. Rockets, is also kind of a feidan, kind of a missile or rocket. Cannon fire, of course, that means to shoot at something. And land-based artillery. Now, we've talked about the word artillery before. It's like, how do we say this in Chinese? Yeah, so it's like a big gun. It's not like a small gun, but a big gun, okay? And land-based means it's on the land. It's not on a ship. So we say land-based artillery. Okay, so why don't we say together artillery? Artillery. Okay. So yeah, they were attacking the ship with many different weapons. Uchi. Okay, so let's read this together. The BRP Lake Caliraya. Caliraya. A small tanker decommissioned by the Philippine Navy in 2020 slowly dipped below the water after being struck by waves of anti-ship missiles, rockets, cannon fire, and land-based artillery. Off Laoag, the official said. Okay, that's a photo caption. It says here, okay, a Navy fast attack craft and frigate, an Air Force fighter and helicopter, and land-based artillery from the Philippine military, as well as a U.S. F-16 jet and an AC-130 gunship, took part in the attack on the simulated enemy vessel. Okay, so here's that word again, simulated. It's not real. I mean, of course, it's not a real enemy vessel. The attack was real, but it's not really an enemy vessel. Okay. Let's see here. Actually, there's a lot of technical words here, but yeah, I don't think we need to read this paragraph completely, but what's this word here? What's a frigate? A frigate is like a small Navy ship. Okay, it's not really small, but it's not really big either. Like Taiwan has a lot of frigates. Okay, most of Taiwan's main Navy ships are frigates, like the Chenggong Jian and what are the other ones? I don't know. There's all these, Taiwan. Yeah, I think it's called. Is it called Chenggong? I thought it was called Chenggong. Anyhow, there's all these different classes of frigates that Taiwan uses. Why don't we say together, frigate? Frigate. There's a slightly bigger ship called a destroyer, and Taiwan has 4 of them. It's called Ji De Jian, I think, or something like that. It's a U.S. It's a Jilong. They renamed it Jilong class destroyer. Anyhow, Air Force fighters. What's a fighter? Yeah, 战斗机. Okay, so why don't we say together, fighter? Fighter. What's a helicopter? 直升机. Why don't we say it too? Helicopter. Helicopter. Okay, and then this is a very special kind of airplane. It's called a gunship. It's a C-130. It's like Taiwan has a C-130, but this A stands for attack. So this C-130 has many guns in it, and it flies around and shoots at stuff. And so yeah. So anyhow, these are all, I don't think we need to read this. It's all very military. So anyhow, let's keep going. It says here, the participants had a mission of trying to prevent an aggressor from landing on Philippine soil. Lieutenant Colonel Omar Al-Saf, lead Philippine planner for yesterday's activities, told reporters. Okay, what is an aggressor? What does that mean? Could be, but where does the word come from? Aggressive, right? So aggressive, if someone is aggressive, what does that mean? Aggressive. If someone is very aggressive, yeah, it means they might want to attack you, or they're acting like they want to attack you, or they're challenging you, right? It's funny because I do a lot of, I told you I do a lot of this 跨文化训练 and cross-cultural training. And it's funny sometimes when people use very direct language, 很直接, their language can sound very aggressive, right? If you're talking to somebody and they say, why? Why do you say that? Or, no, I don't like that. Do you think, well, do you want to argue with me, or you want to fight me, right? It sounds very aggressive, right? But maybe they're not being aggressive. Maybe they're just very direct, right? I know in Taiwan, people are more indirect, right? So when they meet somebody who's more direct, like an American or a German person or something, and they say, oh, what are you thinking? They say, no, I don't like that. It's a bad idea. And you're like, okay. I feel really, I'm worried, right? You do want to fight me. So yeah, we call that aggressive language, okay? So why don't we say aggressive? Aggressive. So if that's aggressive, an aggressor is somebody who wants to challenge or fight somebody, right? So like you said, it could be an invader, but it might be something else. I mean, just someone who's fighting or challenging you or showing aggression. Okay, I forgot to mention, actually, aggression, if you want to use S-R-E-S-S-I-O-N, aggression is a 名词. Aggression means to fight against somebody, basically. Aggression, okay? Or to show that kind of attitude, right? Aggression. So to demonstrate aggression towards somebody or to use aggression against somebody is to use force or challenge or fight against someone. So someone who shows aggression or they are aggressive, they are an aggressor. Okay? So an aggressor could be a person or it could be a country, or anything like that. So does everybody understand that? Okay. So why don't we read these words together? First of all, let's start with this one. Aggressor. Aggressor. Aggressive. Aggressive. And then the noun means aggression. Aggression. Right. So yeah, we often think aggression's not very good. It's not positive. Okay. So anyhow, they have a mission, a goal of trying to prevent an aggressor from landing on Philippine soil. And what is soil? Land, right? Now, what does soil normally mean? What is soil? Well, dirt, 土, right? It's the dirt, D-I-R-T, right? Dirt, that's soil, right? When you go outside and you want to plant some flowers or plant a tree, you have to have good soil, good dirt, right? 土, right? So this is, when we say Philippine soil, here what it means is land. This is our soil. They don't mean this is my dirt. They mean this is my land, okay? But the original meaning of this is dirt, D-I-R-T, dirt, okay? So soil. Why don't we say together, soil? Soil. So, if you say he soiled his shirt, okay? It means he got his shirt dirty, okay? To soil something means to make it dirty, Sometimes I hate it, like when I'm riding my motorcycle and I park my motorcycle and there's all these motor scooters there and I'm trying to get around the motor scooters and my pants rub against somebody's, pai chi guan, right? And there's oil all over and I'm like, so I soiled these, the pants, they get oil on them, right? So that's why we say dirt, soil, dirty, soiled, right? Same thing. Why don't we say it together with the ED, soiled. Soiled. Okay. So anyhow, prevent an aggressor from landing on Philippine soil or Philippine land. So anyhow, let's read this. The participants had a mission of trying to prevent an aggressor. Let's say it again. Prevent an aggressor from landing on the Philippine soil. Lieutenant Colonel Omar Al-Asaf, lead Philippine planner for yesterday's activities, told reporters. Okay. So it says here, or he says, the ability of both the U.S. and the Filipino Army and Air Force to work together to achieve this is extremely lethal, said Lieutenant Colonel Matt Cahill, commander of a U.S. Army unit taking part in the war games. Okay, so it says here, now I want to note something that's kind of interesting. Here we have Philippine soil, right? And that becomes a 形容词. You notice that there's no S here, right? We don't say Philippines soil, we say Philippine because this is now a 形容词. But we can also say it in another way, and then it turns into a F, not a PH. And we say Filipino, which is also a 形容词. But Filipino can also be used to mean the Filipino person. Like you say, he is Filipino, or the Filipinos came over here. Now, it's very interesting because I learned this not too long ago. Filipino, when we talk about the person, we say he is a Filipino. It refers to a man. And for a woman, do you know what you say? Right, you change the O to an A. So Filipina would be a woman. Okay. Now again, that's when it's used as a noun, as a 名词. But if we use it as a 形容词, like we do here, like Filipino Army, then we always use the O. Then it's this way. But we only change it when we turn it to a noun, a 名词, and we use it to describe the person. Okay. Anyhow, it's a little bit complicated, but why don't we say together Filipino? Filipino. Okay. So the ability of the U.S. and Filipino Army and Air Force to work together, to cooperate, to achieve this, to achieve this goal, okay, of stopping invasion or attack on Philippines, is extremely lethal. Now, this is a good word. What does lethal mean? Yeah, deadly. Okay. So if something is lethal, it means it'll kill you. Okay. So the other word for lethal, as you just said, is deadly. Okay. So if you drink too much alcohol, or you, don't drive carefully in Taiwan. If you drive dangerously, it could be lethal, right? It means it could kill you. It could be deadly. It could result in maybe your death or somebody else's death. Okay, but it's lethal. So, a lethal weapon would be a gun, right? Because a gun can kill somebody. Or a lethal drug would be a drug that could kill somebody. Okay, so it's a very common word. Okay, so why don't we say together, lethal, lethal, deadly, deadly. Okay, so yeah. There's a word that's kind of similar to lethal, but it gets used in a different way. Lethal means, I think lethal has more the idea that it could possibly kill somebody, or possibly, but if it does really kill somebody, we often say it is fatal. Yeah. So if you say he has a fatal disease, it means that he will die from that disease. Okay, it will kill him. You can say doing that was fatal. Okay, it did kill that person. But this word gets used in a slightly different way. For example, we don't say a fatal weapon. We say lethal weapon. We don't say that alcohol or drinking too much alcohol is lethal or could be lethal. So fatal is kind of like the idea means it's for sure, 100%, 100%, it'll kill somebody, or it did kill somebody. So anyhow, it's a similar word, but it gets used in a different way. Why don't we say together fatal? Fatal. Okay, yeah. So anyhow, same kind of idea. Okay. So if you say something is extremely lethal, it's extremely deadly. Okay, it means if the enemy wants to come here, they might die. This is dangerous for them. Okay, so let's read this together. The ability of both the U.S. and the Filipino Army and Air Force to work together to achieve this is extremely lethal, said Lieutenant Colonel said Lieutenant Colonel Matt Cahill, commander of a U.S. Army unit taking part in the war games. Okay. Now, of course, unit would be, there's big units, there's small units. It's a group, basically. I think we've talked about this before, but colonel is a rank in the military, right? And we don't pronounce it. We pronounce it actually as, it's almost pronounced like this, colonel. Okay. It's not, it's a funny word. It's a French word, I believe. But it's not, we don't pronounce it colonel or whatever. We don't pronounce it. We pronounce it colonel. Okay. So if you do see this word, it's a military word. I'll tell you, actually, there's a very, very famous person who has this title who's not in the military, and he's known all over the world, and you see his face almost every day. Yes, very good. So, yeah, let me see. Let me write this. That's very good. Colonel Sanders. I think I spelled his name right. It's S-U-A. Yeah, I think. Colonel Sanders, have you been to KFC, Kentucky Fried Chicken, right? And there's a picture of a guy, an old man with a white beard and glasses. You know who I'm talking about? He's like their logo, right? Their 指标, right? His name is Colonel Sanders. Okay. Did you all know that? Okay, yeah. Does he have a Chinese name? Okay. What is it, like Kentucky or KFC or I don't know what. Yeah, no, he's a real guy. Well, I don't know. To be honest, I don't know if he was actually in the military. I don't know how he got that title. Maybe, but I saw on TV recently a story of his life, and he was a very interesting guy. And he was trying to do some other kind of business, and it failed. And the one thing that he knew how to do was make good fried chicken. Okay, and he had a special recipe, right? And so he started selling this fried chicken, and it became super popular. And then he kept opening new stores. But I think he lived all the way up until the 1980s or 90s when he passed away. But yeah, we call him Colonel Sanders. I've talked about, I think I shared with you once the curse of Colonel Sanders. Did I tell you about this? Do you know the story? Very funny story. I don't know if many of you like baseball, 棒球, but there's a very famous team in Osaka, 大阪, called the Hanshin Tigers. The Osaka 大阪棒球队 is called Hansen Hu. Oh, Banshan. Okay, yeah. And so I think back in the 1960s or 70s, they won the championship, right? And right in the middle of Daban, there's a river, a he, right? And so all their fans are going crazy. And there was a KFC there, and they had a statue of Colonel Sanders. They took the statue and they threw it in the river. And after that, they never won a championship again. And so finally, they went into the river and they found the Colonel Sanders statue and they brought him up. And then I think they won again. So they called it, because they could never win, they call it the curse of Colonel Sanders. And that team is called the Hanshin Tigers. 老虎队, yeah. I know some Japanese, my friends who love this team. They think it's a great team. Actually, I think this team has some sort of relationship with the 兄弟队 in Taichung. Like, I've seen their La La Dui come over here to Taichung before. So anyhow, I don't know. So yeah, but it's kind of funny, the curse of Colonel Sanders. I thought that was very funny. Okay, so let's go on here. It says here, okay, so he compared it. This is the American lieutenant colonel. He compared it to team sports in which you don't take the field with a new team right before the big game, but must practice together beforehand. Okay, so he's saying that this military exercise, this war game, is like a team sport. Like baseball or 足球 or whatever. It's a team sport in which you don't take the field with a new team right before the big game. So do you understand what he means here? If you're a team and you have a 大比赛, right? You don't go to the 大比赛 with a brand new team, right? You need to practice. You need to 练习. You need to have a team that knows what they're doing, right? They have experience. They have lots of practice. They've done a lot of exercise, and they're ready. Okay? So he's saying you don't go to the field. When we say take the field, it means to enter the playing field. So, if we have a 足球比赛 and we take the field, it means we go onto the 足球场, right, to play the game. So basically it means you don't play the game with a new team right before the big game. Okay, you don't play a big game with a new team. Does everybody understand that? Okay, so he's explaining why they're practicing, why they're having a war game or military exercise. They have to practice together beforehand. Now, of course, beforehand is another way of simply saying beforehand, in advance, okay? So this word beforehand is very common. We say before, in advance, okay? Why don't we say it together? Beforehand. Beforehand. Okay. Okay. Any questions about that? Do you understand that? Okay. So let's read this. He compared it to team sports, in which you don't take the field with a new team right before the big game, but must practice together beforehand. Okay. Yeah. Duterte, yeah. Yeah. I think so. Because I don't know if you saw recently, China claims that they have a secret agreement with him. They said that it was very interesting. They said they had a verbal agreement with Duterte. Now, when we say a verbal agreement, what does that mean? Yeah, it means we talked about it. There's nothing in writing, okay? So if someone says, well, why aren't you helping him, or why don't you go against him, you compete against me, you say, oh no, we have a verbal agreement not to do that, okay? Means that we talked about it. We didn't write anything down, but we talked about it, okay? Now there's another word that China also used, which is a very interesting expression. They called it a right. Gentleman's agreement. Okay. Gentleman, you know what a gentleman is, right? We always say ladies and gentlemen, right? So what is a gentleman's agreement? Does anyone know what that means? Right. It's like an honorable agreement, right? So a gentleman's agreement kind of means like it's an agreement between two gentlemen, right? Again, it's nothing that we wrote down, but it's something that I respect you and you respect me, and we'll treat each other with honor. And so again, it's almost like an unofficial agreement. It's unofficial. It's not written down, but it's something that I will do because I think you're good and you think I'm good, so we'll be okay. You know, does everybody understand that idea? But yeah, we often use this is actually a very common expression. So let's say, for example, we have two teams that are going to play each other in a game. But we agree that if either team is losing by more than 5 points, we will stop the game. Okay? So if this team is ahead by more than 5 points, we will stop the game. We might say that's a gentleman's agreement. It's not official, but we're going to do it because we have an agreement with them. So it's actually a very interesting term. And China says that they're having a gentleman's agreement with Duterte. Okay? They're saying, okay, you don't do this, we won't do this, it's okay, but nothing's written down. Okay, so why don't we say together, verbal agreement. Verbal agreement. Gentleman's agreement. Gentleman's agreement. Okay, so yeah, I think it's kind of interesting to see what, actually this would get Duterte in trouble. Because if China can show and prove that he made a secret agreement with them with nothing's official, that's not good for him, right? Because, anyhow. Okay. So here it says, the Philippine military earlier ruled out any symbolism in the choice of a China-made ship as target practice for the Allies. Let's just read the second paragraph too. There is no issue with that. The vessel has been used in the Philippines for a long, long time. So any attachment, if ever there is, doesn't matter at all. Philippine Navy Flag Officer in Command, Vice Admiral Toribio Adachi said. Okay, this is kind of funny. because the ship they sank for practice was a Chinese-made ship, okay? But the Philippine Navy earlier ruled out. Now, if you rule something out, what does that mean? What would be another word to rule out something? Decline or to deny or to, often there's another word expression we say, if we, it's not, we wouldn't use it this way, but if it's the same idea to write off, to write something off means that we canceled it, we wrote it off, we ruled it out, okay? It means that no, there's no way. That's not the case. That's not happening. That did not happen, okay? So, yeah, so for example, if let's say you're going to, you're planning something, and your friend says, hey, could we do this too? And you say, no, I'm ruling that out. Means no, there's no way, we're not doing that. Okay, that's not an option. It's not a choice. Okay, so the Philippine Navy early, we could say denied or ruled out any symbolism in the choice of a Chinese-made ship. Now, what is symbolism? Well, you know, what's the word symbol? Right, it's to represent something. Well, a symbol, like it's a, I guess symbolism would be kind of like, what is it? 代表性, right? Or it means to represent something, right? So if you wanted, maybe the Philippines decides that, hey, because we're confronting China, we're going to sink a Chinese-made ship. Some people might think that, but he says, no. There's no symbolism here, right? So does everybody understand? Symbolism is to make something into a symbol, right? Okay, does everybody understand that? Okay, so why don't we read this first word, symbol. Symbol. Okay, for example, what is a symbol of Taichung City? Well, pineapple cakes, but officially, what is the symbol of Taichung City? The Taichung Gongyuan, the pavilion, right? By the, what is that? Huxing Ting, right? Okay, that's the symbol of Taichung City. Officially. Unofficially, maybe it's pineapple cakes or zhenzu nai cha. Eagle. Yeah. Yeah, it's funny, whenever you think an eagle, or actually a specific eagle, a bald eagle. Yeah, bald eagle has a white, the white head. We call that a bald eagle. Not really bald, yeah. You know what I'm saying, a bald eagle? It's not really, bald means there's no hair, right? But a bald eagle I think they call it bald eagle because his head is white, right? And his body is black. Turkey buzzard? Yeah, no, it's not that. But yeah, so the symbol, what's the symbol of Russia? Bear, yes. What about China? When people, I mean, it's not the official symbol, but what animal or creature gets used to symbolize China? Dragon, yeah, long, right? I don't know if Taiwan, maybe in Taiwan, the unofficial symbol of Taiwan is the what? The bear, right? The Formosan, the black bear with the white collar, yeah, that's the, oh, actually another symbol of China is a panda, right? Yeah. What is it? Is it Mao Xiong or Xiong Mao? Mao Xiong, okay, yeah. So anyhow, we have all these symbols, right? So he's saying there's no symbolism in using this Chinese-made ship as target practice, okay? And so then he says, there is no issue with that. The vessel has been used for a long, long time. So any attachment means any connection. We could say any connection, if there ever is, doesn't matter at all. That means it doesn't matter the ship was made in China. There's no connection. There's no attachment. Okay, everybody understand that? Okay, let's read this. The Philippine military earlier ruled out any symbolism. Let's say that word again, symbolism, in the choice of a China-made ship. China-made ship as target practice for the Allies. allies. There is no issue with that. The vessel has been used in the Philippines for a long, long time. So any attachment, if there ever is, doesn't matter at all. Philippine Navy flag officer in command Vice Admiral Toribio Adachi said. Okay, all of this stuff here is just his title, right? Flag officer in command, it's very high rank. Vice Admiral, it's very high rank. So yeah, okay. So yeah, I think it's kind of interesting they did that. So is there more than 16,700 Philippine and U.S. troops are taking part in the annual military drills dubbed Balikatan, or shoulder to shoulder, in multiple locations across the Asian archipelago. Okay, there's some good words here. Okay, so we have over 16,000 Philippine U.S. troops are taking place in the annual military drills. Now, annual means every year, right? Niandu, right? But here's another word. Actually, this is a good word too, because we talked about the word exercise. We talked about practice, okay? But this is a word we often use at the same time, a drill, okay? Now, it's interesting because in Taiwan, we use this word a lot, right? Every year there is a air raid drill, okay? Yanxi. Actually, it's a practice. Earthquake drill, okay? I know that children here, they have earthquake drills at schools, right? So, and then we have a fire drill. You know, in case there's a fire, what do we do? So these practices, these exercises, we can also call drills, okay? And often we use the word drill more than exercise. I think with exercise, it tends to be a bigger activity, but a drill can be a very short activity, like an air raid drill or fire drill. You know, it is interesting because during the big earthquake, 大地震 recently, many other countries said, oh, the Taiwanese are very well prepared. They must have a lot of drills or earthquake drills for this. They know what to do. There was this one video I watched on, there were many, many videos, but there was this one video, actually there were two videos that really, really impressed me. The one video, it went all over the world, was the one in, I think it was in Taipei, with the nurses, the 护士, right, protecting the babies. Did you see this one? It was all over the news, and it went all over the world. Everyone saw it. Obviously, these nurses had a drill. They practiced this before. They knew what to do, so they were very well trained. But there was another one. I don't know if you saw this one. I saw it. It was two kids in Hualien. The girl was about 14 years old, and her younger brother, they were in the bedroom. He was on the computer, and the building starts to shake, and the girl really protects her brother and then tells him to go underneath the table at the desk. And then she goes outside to check to make sure everything's okay. And then she, gets him out of there. And yeah, it was very, very organized. I mean, she obviously knew what to do. She had all these different steps down. People were watching that and they're like, wow, okay. So what? The video was it was interesting because I think it was a camera in the bedroom for their parents to watch them, because it was interesting. Before the girl went out, took her brother out, she gave a signal to the camera, like an all clear signal, like we're okay. She signaled the camera and said we're fine, and then to go out. So I was like, wow, this girl really knows what she's doing. So yeah, I was reading all the comments on the YouTube video, and they in Chinese, and people were saying, they're telling this boy, they're like, someday you need to protect your sister, when you grow up, because she took care of you, So yeah. Anyhow, yeah. So anyhow, it says here, So once again, this word drill has a very different meaning too. What's another meaning for drill? It's to drill a hole, right? If you want to hang a wall on the a picture on the wall, you have to drill a hole in the wall, right? Or if you want to fix your table, maybe you have to drill a hole. So a drill can be a 动词, or it can be a 名词, the actual the tool to drill. Now, if you want to find oil, 石油, right? We drill a well into the ground. Or if you want to find water, you have to, sometimes we say to dig a well, but you can also drill a well, right? It has that drill that goes down into the ground. So that's another completely different meaning for the word drill. Okay, so these are military drills. Now here's another word, dubbed. What's a simple word for dubbed? Named, right? So sometimes the word named, dubbed, has the idea, of course you could say named, but sometimes it also kind of has a little bit like a nickname. It's like it's not like obviously this is a real name that they actually use for this exercise. But if you say, we dubbed him or dubbed that person with a name, it kind of sometimes can mean like a nickname. It's not like your official name. It's not your real name. Anyhow, it just means to name something, to dub, to give it a name. Okay? So why don't we say together, dubbed. Dubbed. Okay, and balikatan means shoulder to shoulder. What's shoulder? Here, right? Head, shoulders, knees, and toes. You've sung that song before. So shoulder to shoulder. If you say someone is working with you shoulder to shoulder or standing with you shoulder to shoulder, what does that mean? Yes, side by side. It means we're with each other. We're together. We're helping each other. We're standing next to each other. So we're shoulder to shoulder. Okay? So why don't we say together, shoulder to shoulder. Shoulder to shoulder. Okay, in multiple locations, many locations across the Asian archipelago. Now, this is a good word. What is an archipelago, this long word? Yeah, it's a group of islands. Okay, so there is an archipelago in Taiwan, or what is it? Penghu, right? It's a whole group of islands. We call that the Penghu archipelago. Okay. Hawaii, Hawaii, we could say is a Hawaiian archipelago because it's a group of islands, okay? So it has to be usually, I think, at least 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 or more islands. The Philippines is an archipelago. There's I think there's over 1,000 islands there. There's a lot of islands. Indonesia, of course, is an archipelago. So anyhow, I think you know what we mean here. Now, when we say this, the CH has a K sound, K. And so why don't we say together, archipelago. Archipelago. Okay, so yeah, it's a long word, but it is actually a very common word to mean a group of islands, like Penghu. We say the Penghu archipelago. Okay, any questions? Let's read this then. More than 16,700. Let's say it again. 16,700 Philippine and U.S. troops are taking part in the annual military drills. Dubbed balikatan, or shoulder to shoulder, in multiple locations across the Asian archipelago. Archipelago. Right. Okay. So it says here, journalists watched yesterday's event on video screens beamed toward a strip of sand dunes where 2 days earlier, the two allies had also conducted a live fire exercise with missiles and artillery to stop an imaginary invasion force landing on the Philippines' north coast. Okay, so journalists, of course, means like 记者, but they watched yesterday's event on video screens beamed toward a strip of sand dunes. Okay, what is to beam? If you beam something, that's a 动词. What does that mean? Like here, what does it mean? Yeah, it means like to broadcast. Okay, 广播. Okay, so in the old days, I know in Taiwan now, in America, we don't broadcast TV shows anymore, right? We use the cable, right? We use, what is that? 有线电视, right? I mean, we use a cable. But, before you would beam, you would send something over the air, right? And when we beam something, it means it travels through the air. Like what? Light. A light beam, right? Remember the sun there's light beams or rays. We use the word ray sometimes, but a light beam comes from the sun, or actually from anywhere. When even this light, there's beams of light coming from this light. But when we broadcast, when we 广播 something, it means we beam a message. We broadcast a message like a TV show or a radio show. Okay. Now today we still have radio, but TVs don't really beam shows anymore. They send them through a cable system. But I think you remember, some of you, it used to be all the houses in Taiwan and America, they had a TV antenna on the top of the roof, right? It's funny, that's something that used to be everywhere, but you don't see it anymore. There's no TV antenna on the roof of the house because we don't beam TV shows anymore. But if you look at science fiction movies like Star Wars or Star Trek, right? They also sometimes will beam other things. Like, the movie Star Trek, right? Very famous movies. They actually can beam people, right? You can be transported from one place to another. We say beam him up or beaming up, right? That was a word we use because you're moving through the air. Okay. I think we call it not teletransportation, but maybe it's called teletransportation. I forget. There actually is a technical word for that, but I don't think we're anywhere near that yet. That's not going to happen for a long time. Okay, so why don't we say together, beamed. Beamed. But I will say there is one other meaning for this word. It's quite interesting. If you say he beamed at his son, or his beaming face, what does that mean? Smiling, with usually a big smile. So if someone is beaming, it means they're smiling very brightly. Okay, so often if your parents are very proud of you and they beam, they're beaming at their son or their daughter because they were good kids or they did something good. You can say he beamed at me. So it's almost like when we think of a light, the light transmitting. So it's almost like someone's face is smiling and they're really bright, happy. So we say to beam at somebody. Okay, so that's another meaning for this. So it says beam towards. Broadcast toward a strip. A strip means a line, a row, a narrow feature of sand dunes. And you know what? What is a dune? A dune is what? It's like a pile of sand, right? Yeah, a mound. That would be a good word. M-O-U-N-D, mound, okay? But a sand dune is often, if you go to a beach or a desert, 沙漠, right? You have these big sand dunes. Some are huge, like mountains almost. But that's called a sand dune, okay? So we say a sand dunes where 2 days earlier, the two allies, of course, ally means friend, had conducted, okay? Conduct, of course, means to carry out, to do something. To carry out a live fire exercise. Now, live fire exercise means that they use real guns. They wasn't like practice. They were actually shooting real guns. Okay, so we call that live fire exercise with missiles and artillery to stop an imaginary. Of course, this is not real. This is an imaginary invasion force landing on the Philippines north coast. So anyhow, sorry, I can't bring this up any further. I would, but the screen's over. So okay, so let's just read this and then we'll be done. Journalists watched yesterday's event on video screens beamed toward a strip of sand dunes, where 2 days earlier, the two allies had also conducted a live fire exercise with missiles and artillery artillery to stop an imaginary invasion force. Let's say those last three words. Imaginary invasion force. Landing on the Philippines' north coast. Right. Okay. So yeah, it's kind of interesting to see all this tension down with the Philippines and South China Sea. And of course, we hope that everyone will keep the peace there. But yeah, we'll see what happens. Okay. Well, that's all we have time for today. So we'll see you in a couple weeks. Thank you.